for them to see me. You ready? Well, hello, good morning, good evening. It's not morning, is it? Well, hey, listen, we're so glad that you're here tonight, and we're excited about our opportunity tonight to be able to discuss a really, really important topic. We're in a series called Let's Talk About It, and we have several different topics that we've been trying to unpack. Maybe some conversations that we don't normally have, but we need to have. And so tonight, we're going to unpack mental health, and so we're going to talk about that, what that is, in just a minute. We're going to get into that. I did want to tell you just a couple things. We've got a group that's in Branson, our Trailblazers, so pray for them. Dennis has been away for 3 or 4 days now, so I'm sure he's ready to come home, get in his own bed, eat some of his own home cooking, but he's ready to get back. But pray for them. We have students that are going to the Grant County Fair tonight. Brother Tanner is going to be preaching out there, so just be praying for them tonight, that the gospel would change lives tonight, that people will be receptive of that. We're just praying that it'd be a great, great night, and we hear a lot of great stories from all that. And hey, just remember, we're back on Sunday. Everything will be ready to go, and we hope that everybody's in place Sunday, life group, worship. We're expecting great things. Listen, before we begin, would you just stand and just say hi to somebody around you? Just let somebody know that you love them. All right, you can be seated. You can be seated.
My childhood was as close to perfect as you could possibly get. But when I was 12, my life changed forever. I woke up in the middle of the night. I was completely drenched in sweat and absolutely terrified. I had no idea what was going on. My heart was racing. I couldn't breathe, and the walls felt like they were closing in around me. That was the night I experienced my first panic attack. As I got older, I started dealing with crippling bouts of depression and severe anxiety. I turned to drugs and alcohol to try and cope with everything. I completely hated myself. I felt like I was flawed, I was worthless, and I was broken beyond repair. See, in my mind, I thought I had failed God. By this point in my life, I was really good at hiding both my symptoms and my addictions. I really hoped that marriage would solve all of my problems, but things continued to spiral out of control, and I wasn't able to hide it anymore. It's hard to describe what it feels like when the most important person in your world says that because of you, they're gonna have to walk away. It was by far the worst moment of my life, and if I was being completely honest, I would have preferred death than the words that came out of my wife's mouth. I finally accepted that I needed help. In my mind, that meant that I was admitting that something was probably really wrong with me. Words like therapy and treatment and psychosis started coming out, and it's a really scary thing to go through. Pretty quickly, my psychiatrist was able to diagnose me with bipolar II disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. It's not something that you take a pill and you're better. It's something that you will struggle with for the rest of your life. And that was hard to hear. I still struggle with my disease every day. I still fight it every single day. So how can I claim to have peace in the midst of something like a panic attack? And how can I claim to have peace when I'm fighting depression. It's because I'm not fighting the battle alone. Jesus has given me peace in the midst of my own chaos. And I have peace because I've seen firsthand what God can do with the most broken of people, because I am that broken person. And I'm standing here as living proof that there is no one so broken and no one so flawed and no one so sick that Jesus cannot and will not heal them and use them to further his kingdom. He is where my peace comes from. He is my peace.
Amen, church. That's good. That's good, isn't it? Hey, listen, tonight it's going to be a little bit different than we normally do things. Tonight we're going to have a question and answer, and we have some guests that are going to be here to share a little bit with us. And so what we want to do is we want to try to, the best we can, be able to talk about mental illness or mental health, and in a way that's informative, that's going to help you understand. It's going to answer some questions. We're going to talk about how spirituality, how our faith in the Lord Jesus Christ affects our mental health, and we're going to see how that works together. And so tonight, what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit, I'll ask some questions, and let our guests answer some of those, and then later we'll save some time. At the end, if you have any questions, we're going to have two of our wonderful guys are going to help us with microphones. So if you have a question that you want to ask our guests tonight, we want to give you an opportunity to do that at the end. So we'll save time for that. So Sean, Cassie, would you come up and join me here at the kitchen table? That's what it feels like. So first of all, do a little introduction. Most of you know Cassi West. She has been around and has some lovely children, right? Abigail, Ethan, and Paige. And how old are they? Remind me.
Abigail is a senior, so she's 17. Ethan's 16, and Paige is 7.
So you have 2 in high school.
I do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm not looking forward to that. That could be so. And Cassie also works at Maple Creek Medical Clinic. She's a nurse there. So she not only sees the physical side, but some of the mental illness that may come through there. And so she offers not only her personal experience that she's going to share tonight, but also professional experience that she can give us tonight. So I think that'll be helpful. This is my good friend, Sean Culpepper. Say hi, Sean.
Hey, guys.
Sean and I go way back, way back. So Sean was at Ouachita Baptist University, and I was at Henderson. I didn't want to drive home sometimes, so I slept in his dorm room. So technically, I went to Ouachita for the price of Henderson State, so that's the way I like to look at it.
It's a very wise choice.
So Sean, after getting his bachelor's degree there, he went on and got 2 master's degrees there at Southwestern. So anyway, Sean has the unique ability to bring theology and therapy to the table. And so it's going to be beneficial for our conversation. Also, most of you know that I had been going to school working on my master's degree to become a professional counselor, and Sean was my supervisor at Living Well Counseling. And so he was gracious enough to take on an old friend. And
He did a good job. He did a great job. Y'all aren't surprised.
You're supposed to say that, right?
No, it's true. It's true.
Well, hey, take a minute and just talk about your family and kind of Living Well and what Living Well does, because we've sponsored Living Well and all the ministries, and it's more than just counseling at Living Well. Yeah.
So, thank you for that. So I'm Sean. I'm married to my wife, Dana. We've been married for 24 years. We have 2 kids. My oldest, her name's Hannah. She had our first grandbaby 7 months ago. Guys, that is really cool. Like, I was just on the way over here talking to my wife, and Selah, my granddaughter, was like trying to find me in the room because she could hear me. And I was like, oh, I want to be home. But I came here because, I wanted to keep my promises. And then our daughter just graduated college and got married. She got her MRS and her BA. And she had a child, and they've moved back to live with us for now to like kind of get on their feet for the first time, because they've been in student housing since they got married. So that's a new adventure, right? Boomerang kids, right? And then but they came with a grandbaby, so I'm cool. I'm good with it. Yeah. And then we have another boy. His name's Elam. He's just started college at Midwestern Theological Seminary, and he's leading worship for the chapel services. So that's his scholarship, and he's doing really good. It's I don't know. It's scary and exciting, both at the same time. Yeah. And then just about our ministry. So I work for Arkansas Baptist Children and Family Ministries. That used to be Arkansas Baptist Children's Home and Family Ministries, but they try to make it shorter, I guess. So I don't know, we've been around a lot, and most people know our ministry for the Children's Home in Monticello. Like that's like our original ministry location. Now, like it's just all over the place. We've switched from being like a more true children's home to being more in foster ministry in partnership with DCFS. We have foster homes all over the state. Y'all have heard of the Call? The Call does really similar to things to what we get to do in ministry with foster kids. The big difference is with us, with what's called connected foster care, you're never dealing with a state. You're dealing with a Christian caseworker who's walking with you and trained you the whole way through. So we kind of have a license to be able to stand in that same place that DCFS holds, to where the families that work with us are insulated and protected. So it's just a really cool ministry. That's one of our big ministries, and we still have foster homes in Monticello. We have foster homes in Harrison. There's some other sprinkled around the state. In 2019, a ministry that had been around for a long time, like 30-something years, sort of exploded. So that's probably a good word. So since November 2019, we've hired 85 licensed professional counselors or licensed social workers to work with our counseling ministry. We have 40 locations across the state, which is crazy. Like, it's a really good idea to launch a counseling ministry in the middle of COVID. Just saying, right? So, but God's just done some really amazing things, and we're getting to be in a lot of places and do a lot of really cool ministry. So that's kind of the part of the children's home ministry that I'm involved with. And then I get to supervise interns, and I get to supervise some counselors, but also get to do mostly marriage counseling. That's kind of my favorite thing to do, is see God drop right in the middle of a really troubled marriage and see him rescue people. It's super fun. So, is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. And I didn't mention this, but part of Sean's specialty is trauma and working with marriage and family therapy type things. So those are areas that he specializes in. So just something for you to think about if there's a question or something like that you had. So we're talking about mental health. And so what do we mean when we say mental health? We're talking about anything mental, emotional, behavioral that could be a problem for somebody along the way that could create problems. And so you may have heard of things like obsessive compulsive disorder or PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, anorexia, a number of different things. And so there's a wide net. But what we want to focus our time on is anxiety, depression, and suicide. We want to try to focus that through that lens. So, Sean, I'll throw you a softball to begin with, right?
I like softballs.
So can you just kind of describe the difference between anxiety and depression, how it affects us, and how they're maybe a little bit different?
So I'm going to, So the primary thing that I know, like you have like the diagnostic criteria, like the symptoms that were like, okay, you have to check 10 out of these 12 in this category to be diagnosed with this whatever, right? I kind of used this illustration earlier when we were talking, is like, I'm trying to figure out what's driving the bus, and if when things happen, do people go away, or do they just sort of get really big and freak out? I know that's like super simple, but like anxiety creates all this panic on the inside, and it's got to go somewhere, right? Depression creates all this hurt on the inside, and it kind of craters us and we go away. So the most simple and really honestly not like probably too simplified way of looking at that is what's driving the bus? When stuff happens to me, do I go away? Like, do I hide or feel alone even when I'm not alone? Or do I get in this panic mode where I'm trying to fix everything, or where I feel like I can't keep everybody happy? So like that's my simplest example of that.
So if somebody were to say, I worry a lot, does that mean I'm anxious? Or somebody says I'm sad a lot, does that mean they're depressed?
Maybe. It might be that.
Maybe, yeah.
I think there's a big sliding scale.
Right.
Where I think like God made us with emotion. I think we're supposed to have all of them. But there's a lot of them that we don't like. And we can get stuck in some of them. Yeah. And when we do, like sadness, or like, then there's other labels you can end up with, but the same remedy, the same hope that can set you free or help you walk out with him. Right.
Yeah. And I know you tend to think about anxiety as something that's fear, phobia, things like that trap you. And I think sometimes there can be so much anxiety that it leads to a depressive state. Yeah. It can kind of trap you in that.
Yeah, the fancy word for that, because y'all want a fancy word, at least one, right, to take home with you, is comorbidity. It means you got two things driving the bus at the same time.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah. Use that in Scrabble. You'll get lots of points.
So here's what we know about when you talk about mental health. You think, where does it come from? There's a hereditary factor that it can come from your family. There are phobias that we have. Anybody afraid of snakes or afraid of spiders? Claustrophobic? Anybody? Right? And I think I've told you about a new one that they need to include in the DSM. It's called nomophobia. Nomophone, right? So people, separation from their technology, right? None of you would be affected by that, I know, but my daughter would be if I tried to separate her from her phone. So, but phobias, hereditary things, childhood experience. But one of the big ones, and this is kind of in your lane, is trauma can lead to some of this. Can you explain how trauma can lead to somebody experiencing anxiety or depression?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, these, like, I want to be like I want to be sitting down there with y'all, okay? Not like up here. Because, like, these aren't simple things, okay? So, like, if I just try to, like, roll out an answer, I think you could feel or kind of tell, it's like, okay, that's too easy, because this stuff's really hard, really complicated, right? So to do my best with that, with as much humility as I could possibly muster, because I promise you, like, this is a humble answer. When stuff happens to us, let me use an illustration. Like, if you ate Thanksgiving dinner 5 times within 4 hours, what would happen? Like, it was like too much, too fast, right? if you never ate and you were like always wanting more and you couldn't find food, it would be too little, too late, right? Those things, like those kind of experiences create a lot of distress. And so you can get really lost in those places. I can, we could all go for a walk. And, you talked about snakes, you talked about spiders. Just in case, just for fun, if any of y'all have arachnophobia, I saw a tarantula that was that big 2 days ago. It was awesome. Yeah, it was awesome. I see it. Yeah, some of y'all. Okay. But so say we're going for a walk. And I'm like, I'm looking around. I'm trying to make sure we're all safe because, I don't want y'all to have a bad experience on our walk. And we're walking along and you look down and you see a snake. Do you have to tell your body to do gymnastics to get away from the snake? No. Like, you can do awesome stuff. Like, you can like do some Olympic stuff, getting away from that snake. And then you look down and you're like, oh, it's just a tree root. Did anybody see me do that? Did anybody hear me squeal like a girl? Oh no. And like that response, that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, like that kind of stuff that just gets us. That's created out of trauma. Like, if you're not scared of snakes, you're not biblical, right? Because the God put enmity between God and the snake, or man and the snake. So you want to be biblical. We're supposed to freak out when we almost step on a copperhead. It's a good idea to jump. But the problem with trauma is things that aren't copperheads are still getting us. We're not meaning to go on these walks and scream like girls. And no offense to girls, okay? We don't want to react the way we do to some of these triggers or these stimuluses, right? We just do it because we're trying to be safe. We're trying to survive. We're trying to get through it. And I'm not trying to evolutionize you. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying, like, go walk and just step on a snake. Okay, you're defying human nature if you do that. You're supposed to jump and freak out and watch for snakes more carefully because, I almost stepped on a snake, or you just did. Trauma does that stuff to us too, like that too much, too fast, like way too many Thanksgiving meals all at once. Like all this stuff happened to me all at once, and I just couldn't figure out when I was going to be okay again. That leaves a mark. That's something that's going to continue to show up for you, and you need, you need some help with that. And Jesus is that help, and he uses his servants, his pastors, all these people to wrap around and show you his love, which is really, really cool. It's the same way with anxiety. Like, I don't think people want to be anxious. They're just responding to what's going on in this moment that they're living in. And sometimes stuff just is weird, where I don't even know why I'm all upset, but I am. Well, science tells us that one of the strongest triggers for trauma response is smell. It may just be somebody's perfume. I heard of a client one time that would get triggered by smelling McDonald's. And you're like, what's wrong with a Happy Meal? I love those things, right? Who doesn't want a meal that never turns bad? But she would be a good girl with her uncle, and that was her reward. And she never, like when she was so little, she didn't know that was wrong. But as she grew up, she just didn't know why. Why am I so disgusted? Why do I feel so dirty when I smell McDonald's? It's because there was this thing that was paired with it that she couldn't identify. Once she figured out that trigger, though, it's like, oh, that's a tree root. That's not a snake. Now, I don't think she became a frequent diner at McDonald's, and that was wise. But she was able to put some of those pieces together and have more peace. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Hey, you don't know this, but you just spoke the love language of one of our worship pastors, Jeremy
spiders?
Raines. No, he
wasn't the
loves
spiders?
McRibs from McDonald's.
Wow.
It's not a trigger for him. It's not a trigger. Maybe it is a trigger for it when they're out.
Is there any ribs in McRibs?
Yeah,
I have a problem with that.
Ask him later, not now, but what McRib is made of. I don't know. We'll talk about that later. All right. So one of the questions I have to ask is because we've had a lot of conversation here around our church about kids and grandkids that experience depression and anxiety and trauma-like symptoms. I'll give you an example. My son, Max, he's 8. We had a tornado scare a while back. And so we're in the hallway, a safe place. And for Max, he thought it was a life-threatening. For him, it scared him. And so now, if it's raining, he's turning on the news. How bad is it going to be? And he's sleeping in bed with us when the weather's bad outside. What could you say to parents, grandparents that has somebody in their family children that struggle with that? Are there any signs that they need to get help, or is there something that they can do to help their kids adjust, or no?
I'm going to give you another simple answer.
Okay.
As
I
best
like simple.
can.
We like simple answers around here.
Anxiety is good, because if you didn't have anxiety, you wouldn't study for tests, right? Anxiety is bad because you can get so worried about failing the test that you studied for that you can't remember anything you studied, right? So the bar, the spectrum that can slide on is this causing any kind of real distress? And if you're looking at the DSM, the criteria for everything is that it has to cause significant distress. Well, some people aren't bothered at all by getting up and checking their locks a few times at night. It might be really smart if you live in a crazy neighborhood, but some people get stuck where they do it 33 times. And if they don't remember if they did it right, they got to do it again. And they can be there for hours. So is what you're seeing causing significant distress, or is it something you can sort of walk with them through? Are they reasonable at all? Because if they're not reasonable, there's a reason. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that we've tried to do with him is to try to normalize anytime weather's bad outside, to say nothing bad is going to happen, and just get him to try to adjust that way, and that's been helpful. Well, listen, I want to shift gears a little bit, and Cassie, I know you got a real powerful story to share, and I know you know how much we adore you and your family, and every time I think about Josh, I just I loved his heart. I loved the joy that he brought to worship, and just an incredible man. And I know that what you've been through has been a tragedy, and sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your story, first of all. But would you walk us through your story, kind of how you got through all that, what helped?
Sure. Well, I'll start a little bit. I think most of you probably know my story, but I was married to music minister Josh, and we were together for 18 years and married for 15 and a half. And in 2020, he committed suicide. And we were in a place in our life where I thought it was like one of the happiest times. We had just moved to a new loving church. We had just bought a house. In my mind, everything was good. I didn't have warning signs or anything. Still to this day, I'm still looking for answers for that. But like I said, he committed suicide. And at the time, of course, single mom now with 4 kids, just really looking for how do you pick your life up from suicide, because suicide's very complex. You go through a lot of not only just normal grief that a lot of people go through, but what should I have done? You take the blame for was this my fault? You just go through a lot of mixed emotions when it comes to dealing with death or suicide, and especially the person that was closest to you and that you should have known that something was going on, and that you loved, and that was your everything, But I guess it was a few weeks. Time, to me, all just kind of mushes together. So a few weeks after Josh passed, I had spoken to many people who had actually gone through the same thing. I had never met these people before, but this had brought us together, and I just really wanted to talk to somebody who had been through what I had been through, because I didn't know anybody. I'd never known anybody who committed suicide in my life. Like, it just was not only taboo, but we weren't those people in my head, in my mind. I lived a pretty great life, raised in church, and for me, I was just in very much shock of what all was going on. And so I had reached out to several good Christian people that had been through the same thing, and just kind of got their story, like, what do I do? What can I, where do I start? Just anything, just grasping for anything. I went to a Christian counselor actually at the Living Well, Ariel Brown, and we did EMDR, and it was great. And I think the biggest thing for me that I realized is that my truths that God had always, that I had known about God and just about life, and the way I actually felt was, like at a 10 and 1 on the spectrums. I'd always kind of, as far as my feelings, had always kind of gone with what the Bible said, and I really felt that and believed that. But for the first time in my life, it was definitely at the polar opposite. I knew God was good, but God didn't feel good at all. God is a 10, but he really felt like a 1, because how could he do this? Just a lot of things. And that was about how it was in everything. And so through EMDR and counseling, I really realized that, like, you can't go with how you feel. You have to go with the truths in that moment. And so really just cling on to how good God is. And so I would literally listen to the goodness of God and songs like that every morning, just to remind me that God is good. Like, he doesn't feel good in this moment, but I really have to go with that God is good. And he really is. He was our provider. He was our strength. I mean, he had rallied a ton of people. The list would be pages and pages long of people that he sent to bring food, pray, all the things. For a very long time. Even still today, I get texts and stuff all the time. So I'm not sure what else you want me to say, but
that's good.
There's a lot. I feel like in that moment, I learned the peace that passes all understanding. I think through ministry, like, you do feel times that God's with you, and like peace that you're doing, what you're supposed to be doing and things like that. But when you're at that low, you really feel like the true peace that passes all understanding that you can't even explain. Like, how can I sleep? How can I know that it's going to be okay when you're going through something like that?
Well, just stay on that for just a minute. Maybe Sean and you kind of tackled this together. But I know with Josh, we say this a lot. There is no warning signs.
Right.
Is there anything that you would say to somebody that you think they know someone in their family that they think possibly could do something like this? Like, the next steps, what should they do, steps they should take, signs they should be looking for with somebody that may be that way?
Well, through nursing, they always taught you that there were signs, to look for, like if they start giving stuff away, if they start pulling away from people, they start just acting differently and things like that. And for me, Josh was always the same, like from... he was his big, goofy self no matter what. He was the same person everywhere we went, and I never personally saw that change, even looking back, trying to dig through those things. But I would just say, of course, if you notice any of those signs, if there are signs, of course, pray for them and try to get them help, and don't rest, of course, until they get the help. So.
Yeah. Tanner and his life group, Tanner teaches a young adult life group, and they were talking about suicide this Sunday, and he asked me to sit in, and one of the things I told him is that one of the things we can do as a church is we can pay attention to each other. We can really pay attention. it's a common practice in a Baptist church, just how you doing? Everything's great. Everything's fine. But if we can pay attention to people that aren't themselves, that have a tendency to do some of the things like Cassie says, to pull away, to be isolated, to mention things like, I think I'd be better off if I was in heaven. I would be better off. I can't wait. I don't want to be here anymore. I mean, things like that we think are kind of, they're just throwing things out. Pay attention to words that people use, choices they make, behaviors, things like that. I think it can, it could be the difference, right? Yeah, go ahead.
So it's kind of like, I don't know, I'm hearing Jacob talk like, I want to be in heaven. Like, me too.
Me too.
Yeah, like I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And so like suicidal ideation or like these thoughts of death sometimes sound different for Christians than non-Christians, at least in my experience. In my experience, when people who like they start talking a lot about heaven, and they're not that old yet, I'll at least listen, and then I try when I can to ask just a deeper, like, will they let me go a little deeper with that question? Like, hey man, when you say you can't wait to be in heaven, what do you mean? I just, look forward to this time where I won't have all this sin that I have to deal with, and that I'll have all this freedom and I'll be able to see Jesus face to face. Like, me too. But if they say, well, things are too hard here. Things are, I don't know, just it's never going to be right until I'm there. Like, well, what do you mean? Like, just ask a deeper question. Like, what will you let me ask what's underneath that? And if they have enough safety with you, if they trust you enough, maybe they'll let you. Maybe they won't. But the upside of that is if you're willing to ask the deeper question, when those moments come along, maybe you won't carry the same burden. If you get that opportunity, like, oh, they said this thing and I just thought it didn't mean anything. But then in retrospect, I'm like, oh, that meant a lot. Just when in community, in your church, when people share something like that's like something's not right, go just a little deeper and see if they'll go with you. And if they'll go there, go a little deeper. Go a little deeper. Like I don't like send people to the hospital. People send themselves to the hospital because of all the stuff that's going on. If they say, I'm driving home today and I just didn't feel like going home, and I thought, yeah, man, I ought to drive my car right off this bridge. I'm going to ask another question underneath, like, what do you mean? You're going to drive off a bridge. Well, I just, don't want to go home. Why don't you want to go? Like, just keep going until you hit the bottom. If they'll go there with you, I think you could get a chance to actually hear more of the story. Unfortunately, and in my church too, fine is an okay answer. How are you? Fine. Well, if they don't look fine or they don't act fine, ask a deeper question. What's going on with you, man? You don't seem like you're the same. See if they'll let you go a little deeper. And like, y'all hear me right, and Cassie, please hear me right. I'm not trying to say we should always know when people are struggling, because sometimes they just don't let us know. Sometimes they won't share that with people. But if they will, if they give you that chance to be community for them, go deeper, like take the risk. It's better to go there than to ignore it and just be satisfied with the fine. When you're like, that fine didn't mean fine. That fine meant something else. But I'm busy and I just want to go. Mm-hmm. Slow down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that goes back to paying attention, watching, noticing people, listening, digging deeper. I think all those are good. One of the things I wanted to kind of make sure that we address, because I think throughout my life, I think it's a rare thing for us to have this conversation in church, because I think 10, 15, 20 years ago, you couldn't have a conversation like this in church. because there's such a divide, and there's a stigma when you think about mental health. A lot of times people think things like you're weak, or they think that there's something you have something's really, really off about you, or the fact maybe you have a faith problem because you're experiencing some of this. And so I think we're making strides with that stigma, but I think it's still there. What do you think we can do, and whoever wants to answer, what do you think we can do to try to improve the stigma that's out there?
I would just say talk about it and make it not normal, but just, don't be like, oh, you're so, it's a deep, dark thing that people, I don't know if any of y'all ever followed the 911 things that here in Pulaski and stuff, but suicide is huge right now, just in our area. I mean, if you ever even look at, it's just suicide, suicidal intent, overdose, which some of the overdose is not, but some of it is. And so, and I'm not saying make it a normal thing where people are like, oh, suicide is fun, but make it to where people are, can talk about it. And like, oh, well, you're a preacher, so you shouldn't have mental health issues. You shouldn't be depressed. You shouldn't have anxiety. And just, putting people at a different standard level, I don't know, just, and like I'm telling you, I'm the person that was the person who said this, we're not those people. We're just not those people. Because that's what you think, we're not those people. And you are those people, though. Mental health is not for those people. It's all of us. We all struggle with the mental health. And so I'm just as guilty as a lot of people to say that we're not those people, but we all are all those people. We all struggle. Mm-hmm. So just taking that away and just, like you said, just going deeper with people. I mean, it's messy and it's time-consuming, and who has time? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
And just, like, when people give you, if people will give you the chance to slow down with them, and they're vulnerable enough to talk about what's really going on, you're being honored. Like, you're being honored by them. So don't go fast there. Slow down. Like, we go way too fast. Slow down. Like, that's a really beautiful privilege for somebody to say, I'm really struggling, I'm really hurting. It's a really beautiful thing when you say it and somebody will slow down with you. So slow down.
And I think praying for people is a great thing to say, I'm praying for you. I think it's wonderful because we all want to hear that people are praying for us. But what else can you do besides pray for them? Please do pray for them, because we do. But what else can you besides just say, I'm praying for you? Yeah. And so just going the extra step. Yeah.
Well, and one of the things I think about is the fact that we can have a conversation about it. I appreciate our pastor. He shared, I can't remember when it was, Brother Paul, but he shared his personal struggle with anxiety and things that he went through. And I remember I came into his office one time talking about anxiety that I was having, and I remember him saying, don't be afraid of medication. And I know that's, for me, I'm like, oh, man. That was freeing for me to hear that from somebody that I respect, to say that, hey, it happens to me, it happens to you, it happens to anyone. And having those kind of conversations publicly, I think it helps us think, well, it's okay to talk about this. It's okay, do that.
And the old school of thought was, if someone's suicidal, you don't talk about it, because you'll help them break down the barriers that are between them and death. Like, you'll help them formulate a plan. If you ask them, well, when you think about killing yourself, how would you do it? Like, you're not supposed to do that. That's all been debunked. Like, it actually does the opposite. It helps them get clarity where they can say, oh my goodness, these are not normal thoughts. Like, you don't ever think like this? Like, not recently. Oh, I need help. Can you help me get help? Like that, so like, if people, like I said, honor you with their story, man, what a cool privilege. Slow down with them and ask them, like, I don't know, it's a crazy, I mean, think about this question. If you were gonna kill yourself, how would you do it? Who wants to ask that question? Guys, I do it all the time, and it's sobering. Now, that's what I do, so I probably have more on-ramps to that kind of stuff than some people do. But it's a whole lot better of a question than, well, just don't do that. Or what's wrong with you? Or whatever might just come to your mind in that moment when you're like, oh my goodness, their house is on fire and I don't want to run in there. It gives you I don't know. I'm not suggesting that you ask that specific question to people, but ask a deeper question. Okay.
Well, I wanted to save time for questions, but I do want to ask this question, and I think this is one of the main takeaways that we're here for is what, as a church, what can we do to help people that may be considering suicide, somebody that has anxiety or depression that they're dealing with? What can we do as a church to help? I'm not asking easy questions, right?
He doesn't ask a single easy question. He said softballs. They don't sound like softballs. Slow down. Like that may be the most practical thing. Affirm biblically sound, clinically sound counseling practices because they exist, and that's a privilege, guys. That's a real privilege. That's not been a thing for all that long. Give to those ministries, and I'm not asking for money. I'm just saying when people need help and the barrier is money, make sure that barrier gets removed, because sometimes insurance won't cover stuff or they don't have insurance. Let's see. Can you think of anything else?
No,
What were you fishing for?
No. I was just setting it out there for you to hit that softball. That's what I was doing.
Okay. There you go. Thanks, man.
Well, I think it goes back to seeing people, paying attention to people, and a lot of the symptoms and signs of anxiety and depression, suicide, those kind of things. Just when we, on a typical Sunday morning, when we see people come into church, we're quick to say, hey, how are you today? And then move upon our way, and we find somebody else to talk to. And sometimes you can see when somebody has something on their mind, something's not right with them, body language, those kind of things that you see that. I'm looking at Steve, and I'm thinking about his life group, and Steve pours into his life group just knowing what's going on in their life, knowing kind of what they've been through. You've had some deaths in your life group, and I think just knowing, being there and being available for people that have been through that, just being aware, paying attention to say, hey, they've gone through a tragedy, so they're probably going to be experiencing some of that, and so I need to be available for them. And just to say, are you okay? Yeah. Are you okay? Sometimes we get into the pleasantry mode, and we don't necessarily want to go deeper and ask some of those questions that need to be asked. So, yeah, I think that's good. Well, hey, listen, I wanted to give a couple minutes for you to ask questions, so I'm forcing myself not to ask any more questions because I wanted to ask some more. So, Jeremy, could you come on? And Walter's going to have microphones. Go. Wait, two Jeremys answered. No, you got the mic. You got the mic. So, no, I talked to that Jeremy, and then I said Jeremy, and Jeremy got up. Jeremy heard McRib, and he said, let's go. Triggered. Hey, if you have a question, you want to raise your hand, and they'll come around with a microphone. And I just wanted to give you just an opportunity.
Are periods of frequent depression an indication of a mental health issue?
No, so the question is, are periods of depression evidence of mental health issues, right? I think the answer is yes, but that's probably not the only thing that's going on. You know, like if you kind of categorize and look at dark nights of the soul or spiritual depression, we can see in history, like Spurgeon, for example, dealt with that. Martin Luther dealt with that. Like we can see from their writings, we can see from some of the things they talked about, some pretty amazing ministers have dealt with seasons of depression. Now they would be diagnosed with major depressive disorder. Back then it was melancholy or you know, they would, you know, give them whatever was appropriate at that point. But and this is going to be a little bit mealy-mouthed, okay? But if you look at like some of these people who've done some, like God's done some really amazing things in their life, a lot of them have really suffered. And I think we're like, oh, well, you know, only the sinful people suffer. I'm like, no, like there's a blessing in there that a lot of people won't walk towards. So like seasons of feeling low might be mental health issue. It might be a spiritual issue. And I think you need to get a little bit of clarity to be able to tell which one's driving the bus. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I was going to add to that, Bob. I was going to say the thing that I tend to think about is how consistent, how often, you know, this is and the severity of that. You know, you think about those two things. If it's something that repeats itself pretty constantly, okay, I need to give this attention. If it's something that's debilitating, I can't go to work, I can't be around people, I can't whatever. Yeah, those are signs that there could be more than just a drought that you're in. So, yeah.
Even hormonal for women. Sometimes it's hormonal.
I don't know anything about that.
Well, I'm telling you, it's a thing.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Hey, anybody else question?
Or thyroid, too.
Yeah.
That does a
I
lot.
think so. There's a lot of health things there, too.
Yes, sir. Yeah, all that we talked about, I didn't hear you elaborate on if you do recognize it and it is affirmed. What can you do? Can you call 911 and go for a 96-hour, you know, evaluation? Or